Hello everyone, and welcome back to another audiobook episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and today, for a late night episode, we'll be reading a few more chapters from The Gathering. Now, where we last left off before I went on a much-needed break, Amanus and his allies have now gotten the Green Moonstone and are in the process of giving it magical life. But time is short, and their window is closing. So now, let us begin The Gathering with Chapter 23. I take it you have a plan, Spartan, asked one of the elders. Now that we have the stone, I plan to use its power to recite the mantra to bring Alexander's wife. From there, we devise a plan to storm the castle, confront Kairos, free Alexander, and kill the tyrant, said Amanus. His plan was straightforward, except for one problem. They had no mage to summon. The Spartan said he could read the mantra since the book and its writings mirrored the Greek alphabet. It was a gamble, a huge one at that, but the elders decided to take a risk. One of the elders sent a civilian to recover the book. After a few minutes, he came back with the book in hand. It was still wrapped together in its leather cover. Handing the book to Amanus, he searched the pages to find the incantation section. Finally, his fingers found a page turned over in the book. Unfolding it, he read the words Ikloksi, translating to the enchantment. His eyes searched the page for the right spell until he locked on Chrono Uxkroki, a summoning spell. Taking a deep breath, Amanus recited the summoning spell's command. By the moon's power, I order Margaret Hamilton to appear before us. Suddenly the book began to glow, the same bluish hue, and soon became hot. It flashed a blinding light, engulfed the room as the book fell to the floor. Everyone covered their eyes. While covering the eye slits on its helmet, the Spartans saw the slight shadow of a figure emerging from the pages. Could it be her? After several minutes, the light faded from the room, and everyone lowered their hands. Emerging from the pages stood a woman in her mid-40s with curly brown hair and slight freckles on her cheek. Her eyes were grayish and her skin was a creamy white. She wore a simple dress with red heel shoes, to be more specific. In her arms was a satchel bag containing graded papers and books. As her eyes began to refocus again, she looked around the room, flabbergasted and concerned. Where am I? Who are you people? Amanus stepped forward, removed his helmet, and extended his hand toward her. Margaret Hamilton, we need your help. Amanus and the others had been explaining the situation to Margaret for the past half hour. The academic was still hesitant to believe until one of the elders brought a picture of Alexander and her from his things. This picture took her aback. She had not seen her husband for many years now. After showing her, Margaret placed a hand on her forehead, trying to comprehend all the information. I know this is a lot to take in at the moment, but we need your help to save your husband, said Amanus. The woman asked the Spartan to give her a moment. These were new revelations to process. Decimus came up and patted the Spartan on the back. Looks like your gamble paid off. The young man chuckled. However, the gamble is only half complete. We may have summoned her here, but now we need to discuss how the rest of the plan will work. Margaret then looked back at the group and cleared her throat, getting their attention. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. My husband is alive and possessed by the spirit of a god, and has been here the whole time in this world. Furthermore, you plan to go to this fortress in the mountains, use me as some kind of bait to get my husband, allowing you to kill the Pantheon, free these people, go back to our times, and live out our lives until our dying days. Is that correct? That is a condensed version, but yes, that's the plan. Desmond was trying to determine whether Margaret was being serious or sarcastic in her tone. The academic let out a sigh of exhaustion. Okay, I was just checking for the details. So you're helping us or not? Asked Simple. Margaret looked at the young girl and slightly glared at her. My, aren't you blunt? Simple shrugged her shoulders. It was a valid question. She took a seat on a nearby bench and plumped down. Avalon knelt and cupped her hands. This is difficult to understand, I know, and you have many questions. But right now, time is of the essence, and we need your assistance. We will tell you everything quickly, but we need your answer now. Will you help us, Margaret? The room was silent. None said a word. All eagerly awaited her answer. Looking down at her ring, she saw the names Archibald and Margaret engraved on the sides. Letting out a huff, she agreed to help them. All cheered in joy while the 7 thanked Margaret. With Margaret's aid, the heroes had to develop an effective plan to get into the castle. Just then, Richard, Maury, and Sparrow made their way inside. Tyr and Avalon greeted the trio. What's going on here? Asked Maury. Amanus did. He brought back Margaret Hamilton. Richard looked surprised. I'll be damned, he did. Getting settled, Richard took a seat next to a young boy. The young boy screamed and ran over to the heroes. Boy, what's wrong? Said Simple. Murderer! The boy said, pointing at Richard. No, that's Richard. He's one of us. He's a hero. No, he killed my parents. Simple saw the anguish on the boy's face. The commotion atmosphere dramatically shifted in a different direction. What's going on here? Asked Esmus. Looking at Richard, he slightly glared at him. The boy's hysterical, said Richard. He didn't know what order Amanus. Looks like you did it, Spartan. You did it. The Englishman then asked to see the stone. Before he gave it to him, Amanus noticed Richard was missing his knife. Richard dagger. And Spartan. Richard rummaged through his person. Funny, it seems I've lost it. Amanus pulled out a knife out of his pocket. The same knife they found moments ago. Where did you find that? Asked Richard. In the body of a couple. It had a note attached to it, said the Spartan. The Englishman grimaced. Where'd you guys go? I told you all. Covering our tracks. Are you accusing me of something? Asked Richard. His hand was slowly moving toward the sword. Avalon, come here. That medallion of yours. Can I tell if someone's lying? Avalon said, This is outrageous. You're accusing me of lying and being a murderer? I've been fighting for these people for years. They can attest to that, Rich shouted, if you're telling the truth. Why did the boy scream? He's in shock, maybe. His parents did die a moment ago. Their wounds are still fresh. This was the moment Avalon was looking for. I never said when the parents died. How did you know they died a few moments ago? Everyone looked at Richard, who in turn glared at the Spartan. Just then there was a slight clicking sound in the room. Amanus turned his head and saw Maury aiming his rifle at him. Give him the stone, Spartan, said the samurai. Decimus and Tyr drew their swords. Sparrow notched an arrow at them, followed by Symbol and Avalon drawing their blades at the Mohawk. The villagers were scared and confused. Amanus looked back at Richard. What the hell is going on? Didn't have to be like this, mate. Just hand me the stone. This will be all over soon. Amanus placed the stone in his pouch and grabbed his shield. Richard shook his head and let out a sigh. Then, this planet will be your grave. Now! Then, bursting through the roof and the walls, Valkyries, black priests, wolves, undead hellspawns, and other nightmare creatures emerged. It was an ambush. Chapter 24. Secure the stone, shouted one Valkyrie. Amanus called for the others to circle the villagers to protect them. He then handed Margaret the stone. Here! Protect the stone! Get it out of here! Cried Amanus. As the enemies descended upon them, Amanus kept his gaze on Richard. He could not believe that Richard had betrayed them. Spartan drew his sword and rushed towards the Englishman with his shield raised high. Grab the woman! Yelled Richard. Hearing the order, the Valkyrie made the mock descent upon the defenders, trying to grab the academic. Realizing they were in a tight squeeze, Amanus told everyone to make their way outside. Moving as one, the defenders exit the temple. Once outside, the defenders had more room to move about. Avalon, you and Vorker keep Margaret safe. Everyone else, kill the attackers, ordered Amanus. After taking Hamilton's wife to safety, the others focused on the enemies. Tira lunged at one of the priests, repeatedly bashing his head on the ground. Desmond slashed away with his sword at 200 soldiers, lopping their heads off, while Symbol wrestled with several wolves, grabbing one by the mouth and breaking its jaw. As for the Spartan, he charged into a whole mess of them. He stabbed with his spear, crushed those with his shield, and split skulls with his sword. And all he could think about was getting to Richard and killing him himself. As he got closer to his target, there was a scream. The fighting ceased momentarily as Margaret brought out a sword near her throat. "Stand down, earthling, or the woman dies," said one of the priests. The heroes were powerless to do anything. Amanus could kill the priest with a spear, but he could not risk Margaret getting hurt. She was too important. Tension bubbled up inside him until he finally planted his spear on the ground. "Stand down, everyone," he said. Decimus and the other heroes lowered their weapons. Reaching into Margaret's dress, the priest pulled out the stone. Snickering in victory, he showed the woman aside. "Margaret, are you all right?" asked Decimus. "I'm fine. Those black monks ambushed Avalon of Work here. They're unconscious, but they're alive." One of the black monks called over Richard and his friends with the stone in their possession. "Thank you for helping us retrieve His Majesty's stone. Lord Kairos will be very pleased." Richard half smiled. "A pleasure, but I'm sorry you can't present it to him." "What do you mean?" Before the black priest answered, Richard thrust his sword into the man's gut. Mori killed another with his musket, and Sparrow killed the remaining with his bow. The priests were shocked by this betrayal. He felt the sword tear through his body and out his back. Blood oozed through and down the black robes, and the man felt his body go limp and slowly pull away from the blade. Falling to the ground, Richard cleaned the blood off and turned his attention back to Amanus and the others. "Don't look so surprised. We've done this before." He placed the stone in his belt and saw Mori and Sparrow with 3 basilisks ready for the journey ahead. Getting atop one, he looked back at Amanus. "Didn't have to be like this," Richard said. "Spare me your words, traitor," replied the Spartan. "Traitor is such a harsh word. I consider myself a survivor. A survivor who's been here for 5 years in this damn world. So what now? You ride to Castle Olympus and present your prize to Kairos?" asked Tira. "We have plans to sell the stone for a price," said Mori. "All we want is to go home," said Sparrow. "And so do we. Please don't do this. We can still accomplish our goals," said Simple. Richard shook her head. "Sorry, lass. My friends and I have been stuck on this planet for far too long. We'll do anything to get back home. Even this." With a whistle and a kick, Richard and his friends rode out of the village and into the night. As the dust settled, everyone was lost for words. Then Avalon and Vorkir arrived on scene, waking up a few moments ago. "What happened?" asked Avalon. Richard took the stone. "He's going to use it as a bargaining tool." "Blast, we need to go after them," said Vorkir. "You will not make it," said a voice. Turning around, they saw Valkyrie struggling to breathe. "What do you mean?" said Tira. "Our master knew the human would betray us. My lord Darius plans to kill them and acquire the stone soon at the arena." She said no more as her life left her body. "An arena?" said Symbol. "There is such a place, but it's back deep in the desert," said Avalon. "I know where it is. When I arrived here, I landed in the desert. It's beyond the borders of the woods. If you leave now, we might make it," said Amanus. "I'll get my horse," said Decimus. "Everyone else, mount up and take only what you can carry." Acknowledging the command, Symbol, Tira, Avalon, and Vorkir gathered their belongings and made their way to the village entrance. Fully stocked and ready to ride, Amanus explained the plan. "Okay, we'll split up into 3 groups. Symbol and I will go after Richard and stop the exchange. Decimus, you and Tira go after Mori. Avalon, Vorkir, you have Sparrow. Once you have them, make your way to the arena. Time is already not on our side, so let's make every second count." Getting into their groups, they rode out of the village after Richard and his friends. By the grace of the gods, they hope time was on their side this time. Chapter 25. Upon reaching the edge of the woods, Avalon handed his companions 3 gemstones. Careful, these are highly experimental seeking stones to help you locate your targets. How do they work? Symbol asked. Avalon quickly explained that the stones, like his medallion, glowed and hummed when close to their destinations. In this case, Richard and the others. Tying the rocks around their necks, the group split up and began their search. Desmond and Tira followed Maury's trail further into the woods, and as they ventured further in, the landscape around them changed. No longer the thick woodlands, but they were now surrounded by exotic plants and trees with vines as thick as snakes. It appeared they had wandered into a jungle, which was odd. Even the air was different, fresh and clean instead of a musty aroma. The Roman and Viking looked around and could not help but admire the tranquil scenery. It's beautiful here, said Tira. I know. We can't idle forever. We need to keep moving. After walking through the jungle floor, Desmond's horse began to tire. He stopped for a much-needed rest. Even the basilisks decided to do the same. Getting off their saddles, Tira and Desmond walked their beasts to a nearby watering hole. They had to keep moving, though. But their animals needed water. Taking a short break, the Roman pulled out a stone again. The color was faint and hung softly, telling them they had still a long ways to go. I just hope we find them soon before Kairos and his men do, said the Roman soldier. Sitting next to Desmond, Tira asked him a few more questions. What is your home like, Desmond? Asked Tira. The old Roman had to think about that. Well, Rome is a nation, unlike any other. For the first time in history, a group of individuals are now working together to better the republic. It is so beautiful, especially to live in the countryside, said Desmond. Is that where you lived? Tira asked. Desmond nodded. My family and I have a villa further south. Or, I should say, had. Before this, I was in a war against Rome's enemy, Carthage. My men and I were sent to deal with him, but we were at the mercy of the barbarian. I fled, and the rest is history. Now I fear my family may be dead, or worse, I might die here and never see them again. Seems that God has paired us together, said the shield maiden. What do you mean? I was in a similar engagement with the enemies back home, the Franks, en route to Paris. In your time, I imagine they were called by another name, Gauls. We had plans to raid the city, but met fierce resistance. I have a sneaking feeling that my Viking brothers and sisters have failed. Why did you invade? Questioned Desmond. Honestly, I don't know. We've already sacked the city 3 times and taken all we needed. In my opinion, I believe we got greedy and just wanted more. Your people raid other kingdoms? Yeah. You see, Desmond, Vikings raid not just for territory, or rather, we don't raid for territory or politics, but for wealth. You see, where I'm from, Europe is vastly wealthy. Places like Italy, England, Francia, they're all teeming with treasure. They also have access to all the major trade routes, on land and sea. Home is nice, but many of us want to settle elsewhere. The north is cold, and frankly, I don't have anything there. What do you mean? Before Tira went further, the stone began to hum and glow brighter. The two quickly got up and went back on their mounts. Getting settled, the duo followed the stone's direction, leading them further into the jungle. They noticed the landscape began to change again as they looked around them. Instead of lush trees and vines, they were now back into a forest of some kind, or rather the thick, dense undergrowth. They had to stop as they realized they could not go any further on their beast. They had to go on foot this time. How much further, Decimus? Not much farther, according to the stone. The object in the Roman's hands glowed and hummed at an increasing rate. Upon reaching a clearing in the undergrowth, the gemstone stopped humming, but continued to shine. Placing hand on their weapons, the two warriors studied their surroundings. The vegetation was thick and dense, allowing the perfect cover for Morty. Placing the stone back in his pocket, the Roman took out his sword and shield to prepare himself. Tira did the same. As they prepared for the unexpected, suddenly there was a shot in the night, and the bullet flew through the air. The shot just grazed the top of Desmond's helmet. The shooting took the Roman by surprise. That was a warning shot, Decimus. Next one goes into your heart, said a voice. Moore had taken up a sniper position somewhere in the vegetation around them. Tira and Decimus hid behind the Roman shield and discussed their next plan of action. He has us pinned. What do we do? Asked Tira. I have a plan. I'll cause a diversion. Have him focus on me. Once that happens, run to the vegetation. Try to locate him. If you find him, capture him. Get him here. To Decimus. Sounds risky. I like it, replied the Viking. Decimus encouraged her before she left. Be careful and wait for my signal, said Decimus. The Viking nodded, slowly separating. The Roman looked over the top of his shield. He then made taunting remarks at Mori, hoping to draw him out again. Is that your best shot? I've seen barbarians shoot better than you with one arm. Another bullet zipped past the Roman's head. That was close, he thought to himself, trying to locate the shots. Tira looked through the vegetation, but it was too thick. Try one more, she whispered. Decimus gave another go. I wonder how your friends would see Richard's betrayal. They'd probably kill themselves all over again. That struck a nerve to Mori. This time the samurai aimed for the Roman's unprotected knees. Firing another shot, the bullet threw the brush and went through Decimus' leg instead of his knee. The pain forced him to fall to the ground, clutching his leg. However, Mori accidentally exposed himself momentarily and taking this opportunity. As the moonlight hovered over his position, Tira took this as a signal and quietly entered the vegetation to ambush the samurai. Not only had she been quiet for her sake, but if she made sound, that would alert Mori and put Decimus in even more danger. Moving through the broad brush, she barely saw her hand out in front of her in the dark. She had to rely on her vision, especially her hearing. As she wandered through the jungle, she heard a branch snap behind her, followed by a clicking sound. Going somewhere? Said a voice. Skit! She cursed. The voice told her to turn around slowly. Doing so, she saw the faint outline of Mori's armor. Good tactic. I commend you for that, but predictable. Let's go. The samurai motioned the Viking to take him to death. Making their way back, the Roman soldier perched himself against a tree with a cloth wrapped around his leg. Seeing Tira and Mori, Decimus cursed her luck. You all right? He asked. Tori told him that she was fine. Pushing her to the ground, Mori, rifle still aimed at her, turned to the Roman. We told you not to follow us, said Mori. What can we say? We're rebels, said Decimus. I commend you for your bravery. Foolish, but admirable. What makes you think I won't shoot you where you stand right now? Well, you could have done that by now. But something tells me your heart's not in this. I saw your face back at the village. You do not fully agree with Richard's plan. Deep down you know this is wrong. Mori was hesitant momentarily. Though he trusted Richard with his life for these many years, this was wrong in the deep recesses of his mind. Moving the rifle away from Tira's head, he helped her up. Her response was a punch in the face. The blow knocked Mori off balance and on his butt. His nose began to drip blood. I deserve that, said the samurai. Then Tira offered her hand to help him up. Helping him, the two assisted Decimus' wound when they heard a roar echo throughout the jungle. What in the god's name was that? Said Tira. Demeter, said Mori. Demeter, the lord of the woods, was a lieutenant under Ares' command. She could turn into any woodland creature, foreign or domestic. Can you stand? Said Mori. The Roman slowly got himself off the ground and grabbed his sword and shield. As the three humans huddled around each other, they heard a much louder roar. All three gathered their strength, knowing an attack was coming. And then silence. For a while, there was nothing, not even the sound of birds. This does not bode well. What the hell? Just then, bursting through the foliage, a tattered black-furred beast charged at the heroes. It pushed aside Tira and Mori and lunged itself at Decimus. Decimus raised his shield to protect himself and felt the monster's weight on top of him. Then, one of its massive paws grabbed Decimus' wounded leg. Its sheer strength threw the Roman across the floor like a toy doll. He roared in pain as he landed hard on the floor, and the shock from the blow broke his leg. Before he could react, the beast chomped down on the damage limit, causing more pain. Decimus screamed and stabbed viciously into the beast's neck. His sword pierced the creature's thick hide, forcing the beast to retreat. With it distracted, Tira jumped from behind and slammed her clubs on the monster's head. Over and over, her clubs tore through skin and drew blood. More blood. Chihiro was soon caught in a bloodlust and fought with an intensity similar to the berserkers back home. In a rage, the beast slammed backwards against a tree, hitting Tira and knocking her off. The Viking slumped down on the floor in pain, just as he saw the creature rear its head at her. As the beast prepared to kill its prey, it was shot in the side by Mori, who managed to recover. "Hello, Demeter," said Mori. The samurai then lowered his gun and pulled out his katana and wakizashi. "Hello, Mori," said the beast. The two circled each other, watching and waiting to see who would strike. Mori kept one blade up and the other down. He had to strike perfectly, knowing he would only have one chance. The night air became still, and none said a word. Suddenly, the two stopped circling and stared at each other. Mori held his breath while Demeter arched her body ready to strike. In a blink of an eye, Demeter lashed out at Mori, making the first move. At first, the samurai almost waited for the talon-like claws to reach his face. But, in a surprise twist, with a lightning strike, he cut Demeter down in one fluid motion, slicing her stomach open and exposing her guts. The blow stopped Demeter in her tracks, and she quickly fell to the ground. Her eyes widened, and her breath grew faster. Mori cleaned his sword and sheathed them. Limping her way over to Decimus, the Viking helped bandage the wound as best she could. She grabbed 2 pieces of wood and made a splint for the Roman soldier. Binding his leg tightly, she helped her friend return to his feet. "How do you feel?" she asked with concern. "Like hell, but I'll manage," grunted Decimus. The pair returned to Mori. "Thanks," said Decimus. Mori nodded. "A samurai cannot stand by the shame of betrayal. In normal circumstances, I would have taken my own life. But in these circumstances, you may need it." Helping his friends to their mounts, Mori began putting his stuff away until he heard a dying laughter. He turned around and noticed that Demeter was smiling, blood dripping from her muzzle. "Why do you smile?" asked Mori. Demeter managed to say a few words. "Think smart? All are dead. They are here." Demeter's eyes rolled to the back of her head. "Already here? Who is she referring to now?" said Tira. Mori's eyes widened with realization, and then fear. "Oh no," he said. He got onto Decimus' horse and told them they must immediately reach the arena. There was no time to explain. Pulling out the stone, Decimus and the others moved through the forest and prayed they make it to the arena in time. For just above the trees, mighty wings watched from above. Mighty dragon wings. And with that, viewers and listeners, we will conclude today's episode. Thank you all so much for joining me for another audiobook episode here on the channel. And I can't wait for you to see the new lineup of guests that I have for January as well as February, because I already have now begun looking for guests now. Until next time, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out.